Welcome back to part 3 of building a MEAN app with Azure's Cosmos DB. Hi, I'm John Papa, and this time I'm going to build the Angular UI that hits the Express API. Picking up right where we left off, we've got our Node and Express app which serves our APIs. We'll run that through VS Code by clicking on the debug button. Now that it's running, we'll flip back over to Postman to try to hit our API, and we can see there's our results. Perfect. Now we want to fill in the A in MEAN. That's Angular. So let's stop our node server and let's go over to terminal, and we'll use the Angular CLI to build out some pieces of our app. First, we'll use ng, that's generate, a component, C, and it's going to be named heroes. So I'll do that with a flat flag. Flat means don't create a subfolder for it. So we created the file heroes component and we updated app module. Let's take a look at what that did. Coming over here, if we go into the client folder app, we should see heroes. Now sometimes it doesn't show up in VS Code. For that, you can just do a command up here, which you can use Command-Shift-P to get there in a Mac. That's our command palette, and do a reload window. When I do that, it's going to pick up the file system change. Now I look at that file, here's the file that it created. What else did it change though? It mentioned this app module. If we look at the Git changes, notice it added heroes component to the declarations and it imported it as well. That's great because sometimes we forget to do that. Now that we have our heroes component, what I want to do is create a new file for the heroes component HTML. Now because I did minimal, it was going to put the HTML in the same file as the TypeScript file, but I want to actually break this one out. So I'm going to create a file here, and then I'm going to go to my TypeScript file where it says the template. Instead of having heroes work, I'm actually going to put in the template URL. So up here, I'll change the template URL like this, and then I'm going to point it to the file that I just created. If you're wondering where I'm getting IntelliSense, I've got some cool little snippets over here, and I've got some nice extensions that'll help me fill these things in. So the snippets, you can get all these and all the extensions from Angular Essentials, which is a package that I put up on the marketplace. Now once I have that, I go back into the HTML, and this is going to be a list of heroes. So let's go ahead and put some HTML in here. We'll start by having a div, and that div is going to be the container of the entire page. So we need a list of heroes. I'm going to copy and paste this in and we'll explain what's happening. We've got a list here for all of our items. We're going to need to have heroes models. We'll create those. And whenever we click on one, we'll select it so we can edit it. We can also delete them. And then we'll just do a little bit of styling to know which one has been selected. Now we've got a way to list them, but we need a place to edit them. So let's put some more HTML in. There we go. And we're copying and pasting. And you can find all this HTML up in the GitHub link right here. But this is giving us an edit area below the selection. And that edit area will allow us to add a new hero or edit existing heroes using some basic binding. Now, once we have that template in place, we need to have something in the component. That's why we have all those red lines. The component is going to allow us to interact with that template. First, we had some models on the other page, things like adding hero flags or a list of heroes. And we'll need to go get this hero object itself. We'll have to create that. Those are the things we're going to bind to in our template. Next up, let's fill in the constructor and go ahead and get some heroes. So we're assuming we're going to have a hero service to go get all of our data. So here when we initialize the component, we go get the heroes, and we'll go get those and fill them into the heroes model on the page. We also wanted to delete some heroes. Let's add that in as well. So now we've got a way to delete the heroes. We'll assume that there's some kind of method inside the service to do that as well. Not only do we want to delete and get them, but we also want to be able to insert and update them. So I need a save method that kind of looks at this flag. Are we adding one or are we editing? So I can call add or update. Well, how does that flag get set? We need a method in here to handle that. We'll need an enable add mode, kind of setting in here, are we adding or not? And then in the onSelect, that's what we're going to use when we actually select a hero to say we're in edit mode. There's one last thing we need to do in this page. We need a cancel button to kind of cancel any actions we might have been taking. So we're going to add a cancel function up here. I'm trying to alphabetize somewhat. So we have adding hero turns false and selected hero gets turned in null. Now if we flip back over to the HTML, in the HTML it's going to notice that most of these things now exist. Now we still have some red lines, and that's important. Here Angular is telling us it doesn't know what this ng model thing is. It's not a property of input. Well, yeah, I know. That's actually a thing that Angular exposes in the forms module. So this is giving me a hint that I need to go to the module. That's the app module. And in the imports down here, we need to add in the forms module. So we'll add in the forms module, and we'll do that like this. And now if we flip back over, those lines should go away. Now we're using a little bit of CSS as well to get the look and feel of what we want. So there comes a file called style.css that we're going to use here. In this case, we're using Sass. You really don't want to watch me type in CSS, so I'm just going to copy and paste this in from the final solution in GitHub repo. A little bit of styles to kind of lay things out, and our component's going to respect those. So once we have our component ready, how do we make it show up on the screen? Well, for that, there comes a default component. It's the root component. It's called app component TS. And in there, instead of just saying welcome to this is where we're actually going to show our application. So here, instead of welcome to title, let's just put in here welcome to, and it's going to be heroes. We'll get rid of the welcome even. And then below that, we're going to put the name of the component that we created, and that's going to be app heroes. Now in this case, I'm just leaving the component's HTML inside, in line, because I want to leave this here because I want to create another file just for these 2 lines of code. So if we flip back over to the component, we have to take a look at it. App heroes is the selector. The component is called app heroes right here, and that's what we refer to it as. Now we're referring to other things still too, so we're getting a few other problems. In the heroes component, remember we have this hero model we have to create. We should go create that now. We're creating a new file, so let's go back to the Angular CLI, and we'll say nggcl, and then we're going to have a hero model. So that's going to create a file called hero.ts. We come back over to our application, and we can go into hero.ts, and this is where we can put in a class. In this case, we'll have an ID, a name, and a saying. All right, then we can close that file. Now, in this hero over here, notice we have a light bulb when we put our cursor on it. That light bulb, which we can do by hitting the command dot, or we can just hit the light bulb, will import the file. It found that we had a file up there, and I don't want to use this full path because it happens to be in the same folder, so I'm just going to do // like this. If we look over on the side, we can see that hero is at the same level. So I've taken care of the model, but we still don't know what this hero service is. Let's go back to our Angular CLI, and now let's type in ngg. You're sensing a pattern here for generating a service, and that service is going to be called what? Let's find out if it's heroes or hero. In this case, we called it hero service, singular. And we need to provide our services in the root module. So I'm going to use the M flag to tell it go and put that in the app module. So when I run that line of code, it said it created that file and it updated app module. We'll go look at that for a moment. Notice it imported hero service here, and down here it provided hero service. We'll go back into the hero service itself, and now we can start typing that in. First things first, we want to create a constructor that uses something called the HTTP client. It's the newest HTTP client that Angular offers. They have another one just called HTTP. Now to use that, it's a module that Angular provides, so we're going to have to go and import that as well. So down here, it's going to be the HTTP client module. Now we'll have to come up top, and we'll import that as well. That's going to be in, I believe it's in common, and then /HTTP. Now, this is part of Angular 4.3, I believe, is when it was introduced. And that's a capital H. Good. Red line's on a way. That means it's good. Then over here, we still need to get that service. So how do we get that service? We can use the light bulb or the command dot in this case. And now we've pulled it in up top. I love how VS Code does that. Now let's type in our get method. So we're going to have a get heroes method. And this is simply going to do a return on this HTTP because that's what we created in our constructor. And it's going to have a method called get. And what's it returning? It's going to be an array of type hero. So we're using generics in here to tell it what type it is. We'll go back to the top because we're going to create a constant here for API. And that API is going to be /API. And we'll use that inside of our line 11 with a template string. So now we've got the root of the API. And then we're going to say /heroes. Now we don't know what hero is here, so we have to do command dot or hit the light bulb. It'll auto import it. I'm going to pull in the relative path. And then we use a little keyboard magic. I'm going to highlight those 4 lines, 11 through 14. I'm going to hold Shift, Option, and the down arrow and hit it 3 other times, so now I have 4 of those. So now I can take this get, and I can change that to a delete. So it's going to be delete heroes. Now there is no generics, not returning anything from this, and when I do a delete, I'm going to have a slash at the end of this, and it's not going to be heroes, it's hero. We can delete one at a time, and I want to pass in the ID of that hero. So now I can say, okay, use that hero ID. So where's hero ID coming from? That's going to come from right here, and it's of type hero. This one will do an add hero. So we'll change that, and an add happens to be a post. We need to pass that in. So it's a hero of type hero again. Now the post, we are going to return a single hero, not an array. And this one's going to be just hero like this, and then we're going to pass in the body that we pull in. Now let's do our update. So update, we'll do a singular hero again, where we pass in a hero. We do a put. It's not an array, it's a single hero. Again, it's a single hero in the URL, and then we'll use a template string here to say, go get that hero ID, and we have to pass in the hero itself. Okay, so we just made a bunch of changes to the Angular app, and we can check this out in the Git changes. With the app component, let's take a quick look. We have that one, but we put in the app heroes. The app module now imports those different modules we needed, and it pulled in the heroes component. The hero service is now iterating out with a new file all the gets, puts, posts, and deletes. We have a hero model, and we have a heroes component, both the TypeScript and we also have the HTML. Now notice we still have a red line on this hero service. We have to come back into our component now that the hero service exists, and we'll hit a command dot and tell it to import that because we just created this one. So we'll go through there and we'll do a relative path. Now the real test is when we go back to terminal. So let's go back to terminal and let's run a build. We can type ng build, or we can be tricky and just type an ngb, and it will run the full build command. Now this is going to go ahead and compile the Angular application, and if there's any problems, it'll let us know that there's an issue. If it works, it's going to put everything in the dist folder. And it works. Okay, but how do we know it worked? Well, let's first just take a look inside the dist folder, make sure we have stuff in there. We do, and they're all bundled up. That's great. But does it actually run? Well, let's go back to our debugger and let's launch the node process again, because that's going to serve everything in that dist folder. Now let's flip over to the browser and let's put in localhost 3000. And there's our application. And notice we're seeing Starlord there. We can refresh again, and we can check out that we've got our network traffic coming across the wire right over here. We've just added the A for Angular in our MEAN app. Check out the next video in my series to learn how we add Mongo with Cosmos DB.